Back during the early Honkai Star Rail days, and let's not forget during the Sealy days, doing 60k damage was considered the best of the best. In contrast to these days, you can do over 400,000 damage and it will be barely enough. For now at least. Hey everyone, Hsr here. So I want to talk about the power creep situation in Honkai Star Rail, and if it's a big negative for the game as a player that doesn't spend $1 million annually on the game to E6 S5 every unit to exist. Plus, if there is anything false I do say, feel free to correct me in the comments section without leaving a dislike. Anyways, let's start with the early days of power creep. For example, how Jingliu and Danhang in Bibertal Lunay are better units than Sealy. That type of power creep is pretty much inevitable, if we consider that it is the early days of the game and the character combat mechanics will definitely level up with extra damage and capabilities on the side. On top of that, back then there wasn't a ton of 5 stars to choose from, so it's either you get this good unit or this good unit, both with the ability of doing considerably close damage, making it that if you get either, you won't be missing out on game changing damage. Remember the days of who's stronger debates? Jingliu or Danhang in Bibertal Lunay? Ah, the good old days. Little did we know about the characters yet to be released, but the same level of power creeping seemed to be going rather steadily. And it's just as I said, the combat of Honkai Star Rail leveling up. It seemed to be going that way until a character that goes by the name Acheron got introduced to the game. And oh boy, did it start going downhill ever since. Acheron was a next level character. She was able to do AoE damage to all enemies in the field with a different ultimate charging mechanic than every other unit in the game. Plus her ability to ignore the weakness of the enemies and her technique just instantly kills open world enemies. She's a heavy power creep for everything, whether it's quality of life, animations and damage. You might think a character this strong might come out once in a while, and it will take a good amount of time, for example until 3.2 and beyond, for her to be power creeped. Then version 2.3 came out with the introduction of a character that goes by the name Firefly. It literally took the developers 2 patches to release a character as good. Firefly took advantage of the super break playstyle where you have to break the enemy weakness to make that character do damage that is enabled by another character like the Harmony Trailblazer for now. Firefly also had the ability to put fire weakness on enemies to make it easier for her to break enemies and enable her to do the super break damage. Once again, it will definitely take some time for a character this good to be released again, right? Literally 2 batches later we got Fei Xiao. Fei Xiao isn't a direct power creep for Firefly, but more of a threat to characters like Acheron. Fei Xiao also has a special ultimate charging mechanic where you have to use follow-up attacks to stack it up. And what's broken about it is, you can stack up her ultimate to the point you can use it twice in a row. Plus she can also ignore weakness type and break the enemy both for her ultimate and follow-up attacks. Now Fei Xiao's situation is different from the others, because this time it didn't take 2 patches for a character as good to come out. It only took 1, which is a new record for Honkai Star Rail. Now Rappa is in a nutshell Firefly if you hack her. She can also ignore weakness type without having to consume skill points in her ultimate state. She can do AoE for all enemies in the field, plus her damage is just so much better, it is genuinely crazy. So Rappa is basically peak power creep. Let's release a unit to make her even stronger and better. Good idea, right? That unit is Figui. Now you can say that Figui is a support for everyone to enable them to do super big damage, and that is correct. But Figui is basically Rappa's best support to make a broken unit even more broken. Like genuinely every time I see gameplay of Rappa and then look at the damage she can do, it makes me regret the moment I decided to skip her. Okay, so power creep is definitely a thing in the game, and yes, that power creep is not a big issue, sure. But it does become an issue when developers decide to do one thing, and that is making the RNG bosses in this game become bullet sponges with millions of HP, which will make your older power crept characters heavily struggle in defeating them. Wow, very smart choice by the developers. I really don't mind power creep that much, but instead, it makes me more excited to get a newer character. But if you're gonna make it so that I need that new best of the best top of the top newest character for me to be able to defeat a boss, is just not it. For example, a character I really love that goes by the name Jingliu, if you even remember about her existence, is just unusable for my case. She really struggles in defeating the enemies, plus if I have characters like Firefly or maybe Rappa that do a huge amount of damage in comparison to Jingliu, it just makes Jingliu not enjoyable at all, which is really a bummer, since I really love that character design and combat animations. That same thing will inevitably happen to the same character you love using right now if the power creeping keeps developing at the same speed as it is right now. On top of that, the mechanic of the endgame modes that are supposed to help you clear the stages easier are always just buffs for the once again newest and bestest unit on the banner currently. Like, does a unit that is basically the best need a buff mechanic just for them? Why not make the mechanic buff older units to make them stronger and easier to use? Also, how about instead of making the bosses in this game become harder, by giving them 10 million HP instead of 1 million. Oh yeah, let's not forget the RNG mechanics that stall you and makes everything based on RNG luck. Let's instead make these bosses get mechanics that actually require some thinking. And not B, if you don't defeat this boss as soon as possible, the boss will activate a RNG stalling mechanic that will happen every turn. I'm looking at you, Aventurine. The massive increase in the amount of HP bosses have been very recent, and if it keeps happening, the game would be fun to play. Now you might say, just pull for the newest best character and win the game, sure, but it's still lame that the character I really used to enjoy using will struggle so hard against the bullet sponges boss fights to the point of becoming unusable unless I spend $2,000 and E6 as 5 them. Plus the newest bestest character might not be even one I really like. A better solution is if the developers actually develop boss fights that aren't DPS checks and actually a skill check, which trust me will fix a big portion of the issue. But the developers won't even bother. Why? Because the current situation is generating them a ton of money monthly, and as long as it does, they have no reason not to power creep the characters and make the boss fights just a RNG DPS check. Like fine, continue power creeping characters, but stop heavily increasing the HP of the bosses on top of the RNG mechanics they have. Or let's not release 2 new 5 stars every single batch that are always miles better than the previous ones. Also, there has been a discussion recently on whether power creep currently is an issue or not. And to sum up, yes it is. Why? First, the developers are starting to pair the power creep with adding millions of extra HP to boss fights, which secondly will make the character you want to use probably feel underpowered and not be fun to play, and just simply be unable to clear the boss unless you get their Eye Lions and Litecoin copies. But if you really only care about the meta, you would be going for the newest and the best character anyways. But do you personally think that the developers are overdoing the power creep situation, especially with the new addition of increased HP for the bosses? If so, how would you like to see them address the situation? For me, I did give you my answer, and I'm hoping to hear yours. If you've enjoyed, please do leave a sub, a like, and as always, I hope to see you soon.